Welcome to RegTech Live with ClauseMatch. The aim of these sessions is to provide you with a 10-minute live discussion around technology and compliance, speaking with leading industry experts every Thursday at lunchtime. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Jonathan Harley, the Director of Business Development at Gemserv, also a key strategic partner of ClauseMatch's, where we'll be talking about the current changes in the energy market and its impact on compliance. Thank you for coming on to RegTech Live, Jonathan. Would you mind giving us a brief introduction to yourself and Gemserv?
Hi, Freddie. Great to be here today. Really pleased to join you. So yes, as you say, I'm a director at Gemserv. Gemserv is a specialist advisory and consultancy firm who have got 20 plus years in the energy industry doing some amazing things to contribute to a competitive energy market. And we also work across other sectors such as the public sector, healthcare, and delighted as well in recent years to have teamed up with you to start to introduce regulatory technology into the energy sector quite successfully so far, and with great plans to do more.
Brilliant. I mean, I personally spend most of my time speaking with financial institutions. And so to kick off the discussion, it would be great to learn more about how the current pandemic has impacted the energy sector in general, but then also from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, like any company who has had to adapt to this new normal, energy companies, whatever role they play in the energy industry, have had to invoke business continuity plans, and that's invariably had an impact on their ability to be compliant with the rules of the energy sector. Effectively, a force majeure situation has meant that key processes are impossible to do under current conditions, and at best they've been disrupted. So it's testament to the energy industry as a whole that, you know, we've kept the lights on, we've kept heat coming into people's homes, and you know, we've managed to respond pretty well to this very strange occurrence. However, many companies are hit by what's happened, and arguably by previous impacts to the sector. So there has been job losses, there has been redundancies, and I think particularly for businesses who have a business model predicated on supporting SMEs or businesses who haven't been operating over the last few months, cash flow is invariably going to be a problem. It's exposed certain industry regulations or industry processes as well, where you may have to invoke a supplier of last resort process. Only rarely, you know, this situation may mean you need to do it more, which is where energy customers have to move from one energy supplier who may have gone into administration to another in a smooth fashion and be billed appropriately and what have you. From a consumer perspective, you know, they need to make sure in these difficult times they have not only the continuity of supply, but the continuity of billing, especially if they're watching their finances more as a result of COVID. So what's happened is that some rules have been relaxed, quite rightly, to get through this period of difficulty. Ofgem, the regulator, has said very clearly the industry needs to focus on consumers and it needs to keep the market stable. So at least in the short term, some of the regulatory requirements have been relaxed, and I think that's eased a degree of pressure from some participants. One of the roles Gemserv plays actually is to run a number of the codes, the retail codes in the energy sector. So we've recently started an initiative supported by Ofgem, where we're working with our peers who run other codes in the energy industry. So we're collaborating with them. We're talking about what common issues we need to resolve, more so than perhaps we've done in the past. And we've also introduced, which we have done, as I said earlier, the concept of regulatory technology to see us through this change. I mean, on the flip side of relaxation of rules, of course, there's going to be new rules that come as a result of COVID-19. As we try to avoid some of the challenges that we've had in the last few months if there are peaks and troughs of issues such as these going forward. So tough times. We've kept the lights on, but we do have a lot of work to do and a lot of improvements to make sure that we can keep companies trading going forward in the energy sector.
Touched on some really important and interesting areas just there. I'm going to keep drawing comparisons to financial services because that's my world, and it's really going to help me understand a bit more about your world. But regulatory compliance in financial services is a huge burden for market entry. I mean, getting an FCA license for a fintech company or a challenger bank, that's a success story in itself. Firstly, does that resonate with you? And do you feel like RegTech will play an important future role in facilitating entry to market, but also innovation in the green energy space?
It definitely resonates, and I'll touch on what I believe the environment should be going forward in terms of helping innovators, new players come into the market, not letting disruptors not be able to disrupt because of regulatory burden. But before I go on to that specifically, I mean, one of the things that has come out of COVID, which has been really interesting, is the fact that the green agenda, the move to a net zero situation, the focus on decarbonising our sector has seemingly taken more of an interest politically. There was a lot of drive from the government before to support decarbonisation, but it's discussed more on PMQs now. It's discussed more in the national press now. It's discussed obviously in the utility press as well. So there's an absolutely fantastic opportunity, and of course we advocate such change to green the economy, as it were. So regulatory technology, and I've always said the same thing, will provide that golden thread between new policy, green policy, and then implementing that policy into operational practice. It will enable a visibility to flow through in a digitized format using collaboration tools built into the technology, using differentiation by different party type. It just gives that opportunity to make complex regulation thrive. You need ease of access if you enter the market going forward. Innovators, as I said earlier, they're not going to innovate if they don't have ease of access. From an investment perspective, actually RegTech can help manage risk. It can give assurance that these innovators who have got these great technologies can actually also make sure that they don't have detriment to consumers or detriment to the investments that financiers make. And I do think, I mean, like I said, I've been in the sector for 20 years. There's been a lot of talk about greening the economy, but from a financial perspective, there's risk around knowing where to invest that money, where you're going to get that payback vis-a-vis the more traditional and secure investments into the utility sector. I think the greening of the economy will mean that more tech companies do enter into our sector. They're the ones that are going to lead the green revolution, and they're going to want to interact from a regulatory perspective with technology. I did an event with you, Freddie, in February, and I said that if you printed out the regulatory responsibilities that you might have, it would weigh 50 kilograms. I think if you start greening the economy and adding new regulations, that's going to be 60, 70, 80, 90. It's going to put you off. So what you said earlier about, the complexity of entering the market, it certainly resonates from an energy perspective. And the energy market needs to change. So whereas in the past there was a clear separation between generation, transmission, distribution, retail, that's going to be replaced, and business models are going to be more they're going to be more together. So it's going to be generator suppliers, renewable storage operations. So if there's a conflation of business models, then there's a conflation of regulation, and the only way to really resolve that is by using technology to help demystify what the regulatory requirements are. So a lot of opportunity for regulatory technology in energy, and that's why we're pushing it so hard, and we have such great plans to collaborate with our market to introduce it. But there's a lot of complexity around greening the economy as well.
I mean, all of this resonates with me so much. There's one key issue that you sort of mentioned there, and what I call traceability. There's a huge disconnect between understanding your obligations, how a body will share those obligations, and then how they actually translate into the business. I mean, you've touched on some areas there about what does the future look like, but in terms of what people can focus on now, what do you think should be a key focus in compliance looking to improve how people approach regulatory compliance or compliance in the energy market?
Compliance and people working in compliance have to be an enabler to the market being a success rather than a blocker. So from a compliance perspective, you've got to think about competition. You've got to think about what regulatory environment is going to allow market innovation. In terms of energy, that's to tackle climate change. That's to decarbonize, that's to introduce new technology. So you can't think about compliance without thinking about its impact on creating that competitive environment. And certainly a competitive environment brings out innovation in my view. And I suppose the next aspect is collaboration, a regulatory environment which encourages collaboration. So in the energy market, and I'm not sure whether it's exactly the same in other sectors, but the most effective moves from policy into practice is where market participants who compete against each other, you know, from a supplier perspective to win each other's customers, they actually design the rules, the regulations, the conditions, the interactions themselves. The regulator sets the direction, it makes sure that, you know, there's conformance to those rules, but they collaborate. So anyone working in compliance needs to make sure that collaboration is at the heart of success, even if it's in a competitive market. You're then in a situation where, one, it's kind of self-regulation, and two, you're building compliance into your processes by default. And as companies digitally transform, building in by default rather than having compliance thrust upon you afterwards is certainly the best way to move forward. And the third element of it is making sure you just focus on customers, but you really focus on customers a little bit more deeply than thinking just by fining companies and, you know, imposing massive penalties on them is going to be a way that improves customers, because customers' experience is going to be detrimented by a business that isn't successful. If a business is successful, is making money, it's able to reinvest in either technology or anything else to make that journey better for consumers. So, you know, you're not doing a good job as a compliance expert if you're imposing standards on people or retrospectively fining organizations, give them the chance to be successful. And I do think, actually, from an energy sector perspective, invariably we've taken that approach and had some success in that regard. So that would be my take on that one, Freddie.
Great, thank you. I mean, that's rounded up the whole discussion very well. And I think what you really alluded to there is there's not just innovation needed in terms of leveraging technology, there's real innovation needed in how compliance in general is implemented across markets, whether that is financial institutions, whether that's energy companies, and collaboration sits key at that, because everyone still has to abide by a lot of the same regulations, with a lot of the same codes, and it's going to bring about a lot better change and a lot more effective and efficient ways of working. This has been a great conversation. I've definitely personally learned a lot. It's not an area that I know much about, but given the fact that we are now strategic partners, I'm sure that we will be working potentially in the future together, and I look forward to learning more about the energy market and regulatory compliance. Thank you a lot, Jonathan, and thank you to everyone else who's listened in today.
Thank you.